The $125 million game that no one's heard of. Baldur's Gate 3 rolls in the big bucks for Hasbro, and outrage as ranked Call of Duty bans snipers. I'm Ash Dixon, and this is GINX News. God, remember the good old days of playing Immortals of Aveum? When you'd get your mates round, open a few cans of non-brand energy drink and kick back with some Aveum. You'd go to school or work and discuss your latest Immortals playthrough with your friends, excited about getting back to it later that day. Except, of course not. No one's heard of Immortals of Aveum, and everyone's like, what the hell are you talking about, Ash? But yes, the fantasy first-person shooter published by EA that no one has played is in the news over an interview conducted with several of its developers. They made the astonishing claim that the title cost $125 million to develop, an eye-watering amount for a game with little fanfare or hype. And this game ain't old, it came out like 6 months ago, and now the developers have chosen to focus their frustration in some pretty questionable directions. According to one anonymous former employee of Ascendant Studios, at a high level, Immortals was massively overscoped for a studio's debut project. Sure, there was some serious talent on the development team, but trying to make a AAA single-player shooter in today's market was a truly awful idea. Now, setting aside the ludicrous amount of money spent on the game's development, claiming that today's market is a bad place for single-player shooters is just absurd. There are plenty of single-player FPS games that have sold gangbusters and have been critically successful. Doom Eternal, Deathloop, Neon White, to name a few. Trying to blame this game's failure on the genre completely ignores the fact that Immortals of Aveum just looks bland. I have no idea how, but they somehow managed to make an explosive fantasy first-person shooter that's completely forgettable. Another developer was disappointed that the game did not sell well despite the devs and the publisher doing everything right. The game isn't a sequel or a remake, it doesn't take 400 hours to beat, it doesn't have microtransactions, and there's no pointless open world grinding, all things gamers complain about regularly. And he's absolutely right, to be fair, but here's an idea. Don't name your game Immortals of Aveum. What a boring, forgettable title. If you're a new IP, don't name your game after a world that literally no one has heard of. And then they went and named their main character Jack. Just Jack. But don't worry everyone, that's Jack spelt without a C. Now, it also doesn't help when they decided to release the thing. Let's see what else was on the menu back then. Baldur's Gate 3, Armored Core 6, Sea of Stars, Starfield, Mortal Kombat 1. So yeah, nothing really worth noting. Still though, it is a bit of a shame, as apparently the game's development culture was actually really good. Staff were paid well and got overtime, there was no crunch culture, and a respectful working environment was fostered on all levels. It's ridiculous we have to highlight that as an outlier in the industry, but here we are. I'm fascinated to know if any of you have actually played Immortals of Aveum. I imagine most of you don't know it exists. Was it worth the $125 million spent to make it? Let me know down below. Winning multiple Game of the Year awards and receiving over 500,000 overwhelmingly positive reviews on Steam comes with certain benefits. Money. So much money. And that's exactly the case with Baldur's Gate 3. However, we're now getting a clearer picture on the actual numbers, and it turns out that Hasbro, the company that holds that sweet D&D license, has made $90 million from the game so far. And that's just from Baldur's Gate 3, because realistically, that success trickles down in other ways. I know a ton of people who've gone and tried actual D&D after falling in love with Larian's masterpiece. And so you would imagine Hasbro are like, oh hey Larian, could you make us some more games please? And then for Larian to be like, I've got you bae. But here's the thing, I'm a bit skeptical we'll get another Baldur's Gate game. After all, back in December, Hasbro laid off over 1,000 people, and a good chunk of which were the D&D team that got the Baldur's Gate 3 deal through the door. Larian CEO Sven Vink has been pretty vocal about it, saying there's almost no one left from that original meeting. Let that just sink in for a second. Imagine nailing a deal for your company that makes them $90 million, and then you lose your job. And you know what? Larian doesn't need D&D. As fond as I am of 5th edition, and as much as I would love more games set in the Forgotten Realms, that ain't what made Baldur's Gate 3 great. Because Larian are superstars now, and they have their own IP. I know that I'll be there day one, excited for whatever the hell they decide to release next. I hopped off the Call of Duty train a long time ago. I hail back to the days where saying you liked Modern Warfare 2 didn't result in the question, which one. And do you know what some of my fondest memories are? Running around with my friend Ben with our interventions, pulling off those sick 360 ladder shot quickscopes and capturing those sweet clips on his Dazzle capture card. So you can imagine my surprise when I woke up this morning and discovered that all snipers have now been banned in multiplayer ranked for the latest Call of Duty. At first, it sounds crazy. Snipers are a core part of the game. It's like going on Kick and then banning sexual predators. But the justification is that ranked is meant to replicate the environment of the Call of Duty League. The issue is, it means there's basically no guns available. With snipers gone, you're basically left with the MCW, a Renetti, a couple of knives, and a bunch of SMGs. And by a bunch of SMGs, I mean just the Rival 9. And it's got people torn. Getting sniped again and again at the beginning of High Rise is pretty damn boring. I've seen plenty of people revel in the tears of those sad no-skill hardscopers, a term which I've never really understood because it's literally just sniping. And yeah, this may create a more balanced competitive environment, but in the end, this is a lazy fix for what is ultimately a balance issue. Like, how many more guns need to be banned for the devs to be like, yeah, maybe we should address that. I'm curious what you think. Are you sad to see snipers gone? You can still use them in other modes, so should people stop being salty? Share those thoughts with us down in the comments. I think we've got time for a couple of bite-sized stories for our quick-fire round. First up, Argentinian World of Warcraft players are pretty sad right now as their monthly subscription cost just got 3,000% more expensive. Now, that's not just because Blizzard are greedy. If you've been following the economic state of Argentina, you'll know it's really not been having a good time. Now, some pretty radical things have been happening in response, but hey, we don't really have time to get into that right now. And sadly for WoW players, that means their subscription has gone from 650 Argentine pesos, which was under $1, to around 12,000. Now, because they'll now be charged in dollars, there's a 60% tax thrown on top, meaning the sub has gone from under $1 to around 24. Ouch. Moving on, Beyonce turned some heads at the Super Bowl after she was shown streaming on Twitch. It was all part of a Verizon commercial which saw her attempt at breaking the internet. Silly Verizon, the internet is already a very broken place. Well, it turns out her Twitch account is real. I Am Slayonce is right there, sitting ready to go. Now, will Beyonce actually stream on Twitch? Probably not, but that hasn't stopped her getting over 61,000 followers and an active Twitch chat of those who dare to dream. And now the ending with exclusively 3-word sentences. That's the show. Please click subscribe. Watch more here. See you tomorrow.